Founder and Executive Chairman of Animoca Brands. Guys, please take it away.
Thank you. So welcome to the panel. I think as we heard, I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation, especially given all the interest and excitement around AI that has happened over the last few months. And I think to start, it would be good for you guys to give a brief intro about what you do and what you're working on.
Hey everyone, I'm Charania. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Sahara AI, also an associate professor at USC. I've been working on AI for over 15 years, most concerned about the ethical issues that are creating imbalanced economics and losing of user control over data and intransparency of all these centralized AI provider. So at Sahara AI, we're really trying to prioritize user sort of sovereignty and control over their AI. We're building a blockchain platform that prioritizes the provenance and sovereignty of AI and trying to build a sort of a copyright system that help us to really bookkeep how AI has been developed, who are the stakeholders, what are the key transactions that's been involved, that we can use these whole provenance structures to backtrace, attribute, and do a fair compensation to all of the stakeholders.
I'm Richard Ma, CEO and founder of Quantstamp. Started the company more than 7 years ago. And my original background is that I was a quant, so I was using machine learning and AI to trade the financial markets. And then over the last years, I've enjoyed investing in a lot of AI startups, and it's one of the most important issues of our time. So really happy to be part of the panel.
My name is Yad. I'm chairman and co-founder of Animoca Brands. We're probably more known for the fact that we've done today over 540 investments in all sorts of Web3 related projects, a lot in gaming, also AI. And it's a great pleasure to be here to have a conversation around AI and the future of IP rights.
Thank you. So we've already been having some interesting conversations as we started. And I think to start with, Yad, we were discussing, is AI-generated art or AI-generated technology or assets, can they really be considered intellectual property?
So I think it's an interesting question. It's somewhat philosophical and also ethical. So I'll let the panelists, fellow panelists talk about some of that too. But generally speaking, I would say that the difference is that I think AI today doesn't really have free will in the way that we think about it, right? When you think about free will, it's not just, can I make a decision by myself? It's also accountability. Right? Am I responsible for the action that I took? And if it's like in the real world, if you don't have free will, which is what some people say, then if you accidentally kill someone or you kill someone, who's responsible, right? It's the same thing. So the same thing goes for AI. If an AI starts to take data and use it to create something, is it responsible in itself? Has it the ability to exercise that free will? Does it have consciousness? At this point, I would say no. So the creator of the AI, I think, is the one who has to be accountable, or the person that is actually sort of behind it. So maybe even the data providers are responsible because they are the ones who have the decision. If I post something publicly, then I am exercising my free will to prove or to demonstrate something that I have an opinion on, and therefore I stand behind it. So I think what an AI creates is not really intellectual property protectable for that reason, but I think the root stuff ought to be. And I think there's some interesting conversations maybe later on when we talk about the meaning of public domain, provenance, and of course property rights.
Perfect. Richard or Sean?
I think this is really like questions depending on what granularity that we talk about this attribution problem. In a very technical way, if you ask for every single image or video that's been generated out of a model, what are the data points on the training set of this AI model being contributing to them? This is a really hard problem for two reasons. One is the computation cost that you actually need to derive this attribution gonna be X times. We're looking at 5 to 10 times as expensive as the cost that you actually spend on deriving this image or the video. So it's not really realistic to really do this calculation every single time. But then also because all these neural models behind these AI models are not determinist. They're actually stochastic. So every single time you ask the same question to give you different combinations of the data points that really attribute to the prediction. So in a technical sense, I think this is not a super well-defined problem to be solved. But then I think at the higher granularity, like more coarse grain level, if you ask who are the owners of the data sets and who are the owners or providers of the GPU compute and who are the developers of the AI model recipe, these are much more well-defined. So we are looking at a better way that we can do a forward pass. We understand from the upstream to downstream who has been involved into the development of the AI model and application. And once the application starts monetizing itself through API calls and licensing, we can use the bookkeep result recourse to backtrace and then to give back the revenue in a sure way to every single upstream stakeholder. I think that sort of provenance is feasible and could be implemented by the sort of blockchain technology. And so I think this is kind of mixed problem that this is my current thoughts, yeah.
Yeah, I think like in the last couple of years, the cost of creation has gone down a lot due to AI, and so that's a really positive thing. The issue is that this soup of attribution that it's creating. I mean, the thing that I've seen that's probably still is the best attempt at blockchain at solving that is still NFTs. Like, at least it's kind of a tangible thing that you can send to people, and it has a lot of issues, but I think that's currently the best attempt. Still looking for sort of the next generation of that to make it at least tangible, right? Instead of this like, just a million pictures of, K-pop bands that are generated and then put on the internet. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting problem, and I think Yat mentioned it in his TED Talk last year, right? So, the whole issue with Getty Images suing because the AI models that were being used, and I think what you had said, Yat, was it's because they got caught. Because you could see Getty kind of all over the images. So I don't think it's a simple solution, as you said, but do you, how do you foresee that battle, and how does it change kind of IP law, considering that it's very hard to attribute, stochastic models to what they're creating and the actual data sets that were used to create it. So I guess the question is, what do you think needs to change from a framework perspective so that you can actually start, creating intellectual property that you can then basically transfer all of that revenue downstream to the creators?
So maybe if I take a first crack at this, one of the things that I really like about blockchain is I think of blockchain almost like, because of its ability to have permanent provenance and the distributed ledger, I think of it essentially as the world's largest trademark office in some ways, right? One of the problems we have in the physical world is that to protect something intellectually, you need to go to the trademark office or the patent office, so you're going to do that type of stuff. And so there's a cost of actually creating that becomes unreachable for certain type of IP assets. Now imagine what the music industry would be like if we didn't have intellectual property rights protection for music. There'd be no Taylor Swift, no BTS, right? No, Girl Generation, all that type of stuff wouldn't be possible unless you had intellectual property rights protection. But the problem is that you need a certain amount of money that it can make to make it worthwhile for the legal costs and everything around it. So with blockchain though, you can actually immortalize your action or your words you said. There could be dispute resolution in terms of I said it, but then you can at least say who said it first. And you can use it from a timing standpoint. And I think this to me is one way in which I think intellectual property rights could be expanded broadly, because everyone who shares a photo, even if it's meaningless, if if it's on chain, if the AI starts using some of that value of that photo, it could be 1/100th, 1,000th, 1,000,000th, there's a way in which that sharing of that value actually can be distributed. Blockchain can do that at scale in a transparent way that you can't actually do in any other system, auditable in that fashion, right? So I think that's a solution. And the accountability still is the one who created the content at the end. Like if someone said, hey, you know what? You took content that I created and you made it your own because you minted it on blockchain. Well, the thing is, that dispute resolution happens at the content level, not at the, so it's more like, okay, maybe there's $1,000 at stake. Then the dispute is, where does $1,000 go to? But there's no dispute that this content was created by someone for what value should be received. And I think of the world as content creators. Every person who posts photos on Instagram, every person who basically plays games even and makes moves and does stuff, actually are creating content. I think blockchain has shown that it can share that value in the form of tokenization. Like when we talk about play to earn, it's not just about earning, it's about rewarding your contribution to the network, your contribution to the intellectual property as a form of reward. That's the stage we're in. But the next stage, when AI is starting to do all that stuff, is actually for you to basically receive value for that stuff that you generated maybe a year ago, 6 months ago, maybe just last week. I think that's the future of IP protection on chain.
Do you guys have anything?
Yeah, and just to that point, I think like the attribution of blockchain is really valuable to Yat's point, because you know, normally like if you wanted to get paid for something, or let's say you wanted to rent an IP for a day to, I don't know, hold a conference and maybe use Pokemon for one day, that is very, very hard. Like you have to go talk to the Pokemon company, like meet a bunch of people, they might not agree. And you know, it's very hard to get in contact with the IP owners. And so like the ability to do that on chain, or to be able to like easily pay people for that based on a certain set of rules, that's very valuable, and that thing basically doesn't exist today. So there's like a lot of economic activity that involves smaller transactions, or like, you know, renting IP for a short amount of time that's just not done today because it's too expensive and takes too much, you know, resources to get in contact with these people.
I just wanted to add one more point, just triggered me on something, which is that, look, you talked about NFTs before, right? Actually, what I find really interesting about NFTs like Bored Apes, when you own the Bored Ape, you actually own the intellectual property around the design of that Bored Ape. The powerful thing isn't just that I transferred this IP for someone else to use stuff with. I actually created additional network effects and distributed essentially my distribution power to a community that doesn't happen today, right? You know, for instance, if I'm Disney, I have to hire thousands of people to go out and basically do IP work for me at my payroll cost. But by giving out the IP and making them a stakeholder in it, basically you create an army of thousands of agents who do the work for you for a share in that. And that actually is an example of why, you know, despite everyone saying NFTs are down or whatever, we're still talking about an industry that's doing $10 to $20 billion a year when it was doing $0 5 years ago. So I don't think that's too bad. And on companies who are now competing with some of the biggest brands. Say what you will about Bored Apes or Pudgy Penguins or Mocha, whatever. These are brands that didn't exist 2 years ago and are up there in terms of mind share. That's something, you know, I think is a good example of the power of Web3 IP.
Just want to quickly add, I mean, ground this to more on the AI part, because I think the biggest challenge to really create a sort of copyright and IP system in AI is that you need the AI developers to really be comfortable and happy to use it. And that creates the biggest problem, because the user experiences on pushing everything onto blockchain is still really invisible, especially pushing data sets and model onto there, because lots of times the business model require the data sets and model to be actually proprietary rather than be open sourcing, right? So I think the key questions here is like, you want to migrate the life cycle of AI developments onto a blockchain-based platform, but then you also need to guarantee that they feel the same as working on AWS, as working on Google Cloud, and many other of the similar ecosystem platform. And then it requires sort of a really good mechanisms that you can combine the best of state-of-the-art stuff onto this blockchain platform. But I think we are really getting much closer to it today, because so much things are open source, say the Llama whole ecosystem from Meta. So I think we are in a pretty good timing for considering building that.
I think that's actually dovetails very well into the next question, which is really around, you know, the whole promise of the blockchain being decentralized and the ability to create kind of that downstream effect of passing on revenue to creators and kind of everybody who's involved, versus almost the centralization of compute and, you know, the power required for AI. How do you see that playing out, you know, over the next little while? Given that, like as you said, they are going to need to work together to actually, for us to actually have a system that works.
Yeah, I can take this first. I feel like we are in a pretty good opportunity window to really convince the AI, the Web2 AI builders to come into this kind of a revenue sharing economic models to work. Mainly because in the centralized setup, building a prototype of AI is much more expensive than 5 years ago, because so much you need to spend on GPU compute. The state-of-the-art models out there, even the open source one like Llama, is much, much bigger than the model people can handle. That means like you are really working on a very high bar that will start with consuming hundreds of thousands of dollars on just GPU compute. That means like these builders have to just do fundraise from traditional Web2 VC, and those VCs now is looking at everything: revenue, users, profits, net of the GPU cost that you're spending. Really hard, really high bar to start. But I think if you provide a sort of provenance infrastructure where the different stakeholders, like GPU compute, giving you 100 hours of GPU compute taking in exchange of 5% of the share of the AI model that you develop. Similarly, data providers taking another 10%. Everyone can sort of pool together their own resource in exchange of the share, which are sort of permissionless and sort of trustless, recorded using the blockchain system. That way, you create a new way of pooling capital to build AI in a much more efficient way. And on top of that, more even exciting things, you have the whole DeFi ecosystem that can be built on top to really find a secondary market value of the AI access, assuming they are high quality in terms of the performance of the model, in terms of the track records of the developers, all the usage of it. So I feel like this is really exciting timing that we can find ways to combine the Web3 community, give them the DeFi sort of nature of the AI access, but then you're putting the capital to really bootstrap the AI developments in a much simpler way.
Yeah, and just to that point, I think there's a balance between the centralized AI companies and this decentralized approach. The issues with the decentralized approach is there's issues with bandwidth and cost, right? Maybe handling all these AI transactions is not really something that Ethereum blockchain can do, nor is it something that the current Ethereum L2s can do. They just cap out at too few transactions per second, and there's all these data, kind of problems that it's not available. So the benefit, I think, is some of the biggest AI companies right now, it's not open source, right? Apart from Llama. So you don't really know what's in the model that you're using. You don't know what the original data that went into the model is, right? And so I think for new technologies like ZK-ML or OPML or what Sahara is building, the ability to see what is in the model and what was put into it, I think a lot of people will appreciate that. And that's not really something that I think the Web2 AI companies are focusing on at all. Just to the earlier point, the Web2 companies, there's very few AI companies that make a lot of money right now. It's 3 companies make most of the money. So they're trying to figure out how to make money. They don't have time to figure out this sort of attribution side of things. So.
Anything? Yeah.
Yeah, and so quickly, first, I would say that we've seen some of that roadmap already when you think about sort of IP rights management. I think there's both the consumer and the business angle. On the consumer side, really the permissionless nature of IP rights. So I see the future as permissionless IP rights management in the same way that we see permissionless blockchains, how they operate. And we've seen this in the early days really with UGC. I mean, UGC wasn't official, but it was basically a form of permissionless IP rights management. I take an anime, a content, and I just make something out of it. I create satire, I create parody, I create sort of AMVs, and these were actually UGC. And remember, back in the day, all the rights holders were like, oh my goodness, this is terrible, right? Let's stop it, stop it, stop it. And then actually, well, hold on, we can give you a little bit of revenue share from that. And YouTube basically created sort of, content ID, and actually that made them more popular, more money, more value as a result, right? Now imagine when that kind of IP rights management is not one that is only done by a corporation that holds the music rights, but by everyone's content. And you have a global ID management system where you can track around that. I think that's one major sort of area where attribution is useful. But on the more corporate side, talking about the language models, who do we want these AIs to be owned with? And that to me is where tokenization is interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, we're owning a network or a network effect, right? AI builds from the network effects it constructs. These network effects can now be owned through tokenization by the community. And I don't believe a future there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 big AIs. I actually think AI is biased because of the content it's create, right? Whether it's a Chinese AI, a Korean AI, in fact, a US AI, right? I mean, for instance, you can't access OpenAI anything in the greater China region except maybe Taiwan for other national security reasons, they would say. Either way, you're creating different types. So I think in the future, we're going to have dozens of different AIs that will be like our private advisors with their biases and backgrounds and information, and they will feed information to us. These will all have their own different footprints. We will all need to have ownership in them as a community. I think that's actually where we ensure a future where we don't have overlords of AI as a result.
I think, as we can tell, this topic is very complicated and detailed, and we're running out of time, but I'd like to give each of you, an opportunity to frame kind of the last thing you want to say. And the way I usually like to look at it is, in this type of complex industry, what are the challenges or opportunities, or the one thing, if we came back next year, you would say, look, we actually made real progress, and this is what would matter?
Yeah, I think two things really the Web3 will help AI. Web3 for AI. One is the IP copyrights based on provenance infrastructure with the trustless and permissionless sort of a system. Number two is the collaborative and open economy that can possibly be pulled with the DeFi sort of infrastructure back to the AI capital. And really sort of like a mutual bridging each other. I think that will be a healthy growth.
Yeah, I would say like the Web3 community has a lot of experience with trying to decentralize everything, and most of the time it doesn't work. But having that experience is really helpful, and it's like, that experience is not something the wider world has, right? And then the other part is, I just think you don't want a future where like a few companies control almost all like the kind of human knowledge, right? So that's not really a future I want to live in. So then you have to do something to spread it out amongst more people and get network effects going so that it's actually the kind of economically best solution, so yeah.
So the way I look at it is that we will have success in IP rights management with AI and blockchain when billions of dollars of more value goes to creators around the world than where they're going today. Sort of interesting fact point, Spotify basically pays out $7 to $8 billion of royalties a year for the entire music industry, which is insane in the sense that it is worth absolutely nothing. NFTs essentially paid to creators and royalty holders the equivalent of almost $20 billion in that same year. And that's just in the beginning. So imagine what it could mean for the future when we use AI to create value and we create revenue streams from that. Actually, it'll dwarf the Web2 royalty system. And I think we will see success, and artists and creators will come and flock to Web3 when they realize that that's the better future, as the people who are in the NFT world already see. So that's, I think, hopefully we can talk about that in the next 1 or 2 years.
Thank you guys so much. It was a privilege, to listen and learn from you guys, and I hope everybody got something out of it. So thank you.
Thank you.